Hey guys, what's up? I just got in from a nice little jog out there. It's great weather out there today. I'm here with another book review. I seem to have a lot of those. Never run out of books on my shelf and things, but I think you're really gonna like this one. I know that previously I had reviewed The First King of Shannara by Terry Books. And so that kind of sets the stage for, obviously, the original trilogy, the first 3 books of the world of Shannara. And so hopefully, going off of that, we can go right into this next book. Obviously, this is the first book of the original, about 1979 was when it was released, The Sword of Shannara. Okay, this is the book we're going to be reviewing today. And like I said, a lot of people look at these things and they're real intimidated by it. But guys, I'm telling you, if a dumb guy like me can sit there and figure it out, it's not that difficult. It is an amazing book, and I will tell you right away, after reading The First King of Shannara, I was the problem I had with that particular book was not so much the story, because it had a whole bunch of backstory in there, which is really nice. And it actually has the actual forging of the sword and how that came about, and discovering the Black Elf Stone that helped make it, and Bremen, and obviously the small little guy known as Allanon, that for all of you Shannara fans out there, we know his importance later on in the series. But basically, it was very expedited. It was a real quick, you know, I mean, it had a lot of information, but it really didn't, because the writing is what really attracts me to a book series, not so much the information, because, I mean, anybody can just simply write information, write information down on a paper, you know, but very few is the storytelling is what is the whole enchilada, and the whole fascination with books is it's the story, you know. Attract me to the story, get me to stay entranced in that world, make me want to stay. And as a reader, that is what I look for. Is, I mean, I can sit here and put a whole bunch of information down on a page, and that doesn't necessarily make me an author, but I want to get caught up in the story. I want to suspend my belief system for a while, and I want to be in another world, obviously. And, you know, that's partially why I've just, you know, I do all these readings and everything like this. But be all that as it may, going back to the Sword of Shannara, which is the writing, instantly I noticed for this particular book was a lot better than the First King of Shannara, because that one I was just like, well, I mean, this is a really kind of cool world, but I mean, the writing's really not all that great. But I mean, you get within the first few paragraphs of this book right here, and I could tell you the writing was really, really good. I mean, Terry Brooks did an outstanding job on this book right here. We all learned from the previous book about Jero Shannara and Preya Shannara, and you know, and the forging of what would be the Sword of Shannara, and kind of the last battle there, and what we would have think is defeating Mr. Brona, the Warlock Lord. Doesn't quite do so, but I mean it's really good the way that one sets up, because without the first prequel book, you wouldn't have known how the sword actually was made. I mean, you can go without reading the prequel and go right into the Sword of Shannara, and I mean, you don't lose a whole lot of information, because all the information is there plus more so, excuse me. But what I liked about the prequel, The First King of Shannara, was that it was the actual forging of the weapon. But obviously, the Sword of Shannara, the writing was a lot better in this one. The adventures are always there. It's kind of fast-paced. I mean, not too fast-paced, but it really does a good job of not just shooting out all these informations like there's lots of books right now that are fast-paced, but I mean, they really don't have that much substance as far as meat and potatoes. And this book gives you all the meat and potatoes. It takes time to get into the characters' minds, and sometimes you know, you read a few paragraphs trying to figure, okay, what story has he gone back to? Oh, okay, this is the story about, okay, now we're at Calahorn, and you know, and people over the time have tried to compare Terry Brooks and the Shannara books to the Lord of the Rings and Tolkien, but I mean, I say this in his defense: everybody is going to be compared and measured and held up to Tolkien, because Tolkien is Tolkien. It's like he's like the Chuck Norris of the fantasy book. He's the Godfather. So everybody is going to be scrutinized by being held up to him. And so, but regardless of that fact, I think that this series stands on its own, and I recommend that you read it because it is very good. This particular book starts off about 250 years from where the first king of Shannara left off, with the Shannara, the sword being left in the Tri-Stone at Paranor. Okay, so here we are, and we've seen that Brona and his forces have slowly, over the years, 250 years or so, has started to regain power and come back. You know, and we have a whole new cast of characters. We have you know, Flick Ohmsford, and then obviously Shea Ohmsford, who is half-elf, but he's been adopted into this family, the Ohmsford family, almost kind of like Anakin, almost kind of like Luke Skywalker. I mean, something happened to his family, and he is half-elf, but he has been adopted and raised by the Ohmsfords. And his brother, who, I mean, basically is his brother. It's just not his blood brother, but they've been raised as brothers. Flick is kind of the when it starts off, Flick is, you know, meets Allanon in the forest and stuff, and you know, Flick is the very he's very and his character is he's very hesitant. He's very, I mean, he loves his brother. He's devoted to his brother Shea, but he's kind of conflicted because he doesn't trust some of Shea's chosen friends, you know, like Minion, the Prince of Leia, and everything, and you know, which is a big friend that comes later into the series. But he's very distrustful. He's very protective of his brother, but he's very wishy-washy at the beginning, where he doesn't really know what he wants to do. He wants to help, but he doesn't really think he can offer anything because he's just a guy, and you know, and Shea has been told that he's apparently all the other heirs of Shannara, of the bloodline from Gerald Shannara, has all been killed or died out somehow. And this half-elf, Shea Ohmsford, happens to be the very last of that line. And is the only one, apparently, that can wield the ancient sword of Shannara that's being held at Paranor. And Flick is also very distrustful of this Allanon, because Allanon, he doesn't give them the full story, and both of them know that they've not been given the full story. But, I mean, they've kind of got to go on, and they still don't believe that, you know, Shea is of any importance into this series. But once again, that was kind of the problem with Gerald Shannara, was Gerald Shannara, you know, he really didn't believe that he could. And going into this realm of the spirit realm where Brona is, you know, the master, I mean, everything is in belief. I mean, it's not about the sciences anymore, that things that can be proved. The big thing here is that if you don't believe in yourself, it's kind of like that scene in Salem's Lot where if you don't believe in the cross, well then, you know, the vampire just comes right up, grabs it, and crushes it, because it's nothing if you don't actually believe in it. Like a talisman. Which is basically, I mean, what the Sword of Shannara is, I mean, regardless of if you find the person that can wield it, I mean, all these people know that it's only Shannara that can do it, so their belief that a guy from Shannara is the only one that can wield the sword is the sole reason why the only person can do it, is because of the belief of the people. And this is not a war between a guy that you can fight against on the battlefield. I mean, this is a war against an ethereal being that has had his mind into the spiritual realm that's all based upon belief in magic and mysticism. And so that's the only way that you can fight this guy, is with truth, which, as we learned in the first book, the Sword of Shannara symbolizes truth. You know, the unknowing truth about who you are and what about you, but about the world as well. And so, as you can see that setting up, they set off on this journey and they meet very different people. Like, obviously, they run into Minnie and the Prince of Leah, and they go on to this. Then they meet Hindle. God, I love Hindle. He's of the dwarves. He's a battle-tested guy, you know, and they all said he's added to the company, which he comes in later. That was really great. And then, of course, Allanon brings in with him these two elves, Durin and Dale, who, you know, from their cities to, they're along with him in the journey. And they, once again, play a big part in this series. And then, obviously, Balinar from Callahorn, which can also, Callahorn and what happens in the book with Callahorn can kind of almost be, what do you mean? Let's see. Can almost be compared to Rohan in the Lord of the Rings series. I will say that. Because you have the king, Rul Baghana, is the king of Callahorn. And obviously, the eldest son is Balinor, who is a man, obviously. But, I mean, he's kind of estranged right now. And he's headed out with his, you know, he's kind of headed out with his, you know, kind of father for not wanting to step up into that role. And then obviously you have Palance, the younger brother here, that's kind of, you know, he's very subject to, you know, being pushed into a certain way and being influenced, you know, kind of like Wormtongue in Rohan. There's a guy there named Stimham that's kind of influencing Palance, and the whole thing is through all these journeys and going through, one of my favorite scenes is, you know, I guess you could call the Fellowship. They're going through, you know, the Hall of Kings, and there's, you know, these beings where they can't see the beings. It almost kind of reminds you of the Never-Ending Story, where they're going through those sphinxes and they can see right into your soul, and so, you know, they have to blind themselves, and then they go through the other hall of the winds, which there's these banshee things that you can't see them, but they speak in your mind and they drive you crazy. So they've got to plug your ears and all the various things to get in there and finally get in there to where the Sword of Shannara is supposed to be. I mean, it's a fantastically written part of it. You know, and then they have great scenes, obviously, with the school bears, kind of reminiscent of the Ringwraiths or the Nazgul. So you see lots of things, not just Lord of the Rings. There's a little bit of Never-Ending Story in there, kind of going through the Sphinxes, you know, with Artax and you know, and so, I mean, you see a little bit of that in there too. But, you know, the whole journey to get there, and then, of course, Balinar, they have to split back up, and Balinar has to go get things ready for the invasion of the Warlock Lord, and he comes back and he finds that his father's sick, and you know, the sons took over, and then that weird crazy man Stenham, he's kind of directing he's stirring the pot, you know. And so, I mean, all these elements are great. And then, obviously, I mean, you have Panaman Creo, which was the ancestor, who's a thief now, and he's walking around with you know, he's walking around with this elf. I mean, excuse me, not an elf, but a troll, you know, and so they're like, wow. I mean, Panaman Creo is the ancestor of the guy that actually forged the Sword of Shannara. And so, I mean, here you go. That's cool. I mean, that plays into it, and they wind up, you know, they get, Shea gets split off from them as the story transpires. He's got to get back with them. He runs into Creel, and they're off on their part of it, you know. And then the elves have to go get ready for the invasion. Let's say Minion is sent to Kern, and he winds up saving Cheryl, who's the princess, of Kern. It's an island city, and Palance over in Callahorn, he really wants to marry her, and she really don't want anything to do with him. She kind of likes Balinar. You see all those delicacies going on there. It all boils down to, oh yeah, her name is Cheryl Ravenlock, which is kind of close to, you know, a guy from the first book too. Could she be a descendant of Kenseth Ravenlock from the first book, the companion to Bremen? All this is going on, and then I mean he keeps it going on, and Terry Brooks does, and he brings it all back around for an outstanding ending to the book, and it gets you right ready. But I highly recommend, guys. This stands on its own. This is a very excellent book. I highly recommend you go out and get the Sword of Shannara. And you know, the next one that's coming out, obviously, you know, the Elfstones of Shannara. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. So go out, read this. Run, don't walk. From my bookshelf to yours. Happy reading, guys. I think you're gonna like it.